I am excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter podcast. I have my special guest, Krista Tan, who is the co-founder of the Talent Collective. And why this is an important podcast is because it's going to be about community and the impact of a recruiting community that it can have on your career. And I'm not going to lie, like finding a recruiting community mid-level in my career has made the difference
Mm.
in our company, in our family, in my career. Actually, if you want to get laugh at finding a good recruiting community has probably put an additional few $100,000 back into our business. So we're going to talk about why it is so important to find the right community so that way that can help you grow. And on top of that, there's like this really cool thing going around called fractional recruiting. It's an awesome way to bolt on some additional revenue to your business, especially in these times where things are just a little crazy. So Chris is definitely going to do a little bit of a deep dive on that too. So definitely stay tuned so you can learn you can add that on top of your business. But Krista, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Big fan of your
Our,
podcast.
we'd like to have fun, but I'm sure, as you know, we get started. How did you even end up in this wonderful world of recruiting?
Yeah, so I think I'm one of the few that had a more intentional route into recruiting. So went to grad school for a master's in counseling. My specialization was in career development. My main goal going into that program was to be a career counselor at a university. However, midway through my program, I was interning at a college, San Diego State to be exact, and really realized that the pace wasn't exactly for me. I really loved the interaction with the students. That was like the heart of what I wanted to do, helping people with their careers. But I realized I needed something a little bit, quicker, and corporate was probably for me. So right after grad school, I moved to San Francisco and I wanted to get into recruiting. My dream job would have been to be working at Google in university recruiting because I still had this, passion for college students. However, it was 2008, which was the last recession we were in, and nobody was hiring, especially for recruiters. So out of what I think was desperation at the time to pay my bills, I took a job in agency recruiting. And it honestly ended up being the best thing that could have happened to me. And I landed at the right agency. I ended up being there for over 13 years. Started, as an individual contributor, worked a desk for 6 or 7 years, and then went into the management and operations side. And pretty much by the end of my tenure there, I was running the company. So it was an amazing journey. I could not be more thankful for working there. And then I went in-house, but essentially that's how I got my start.
So you actually were looking for a recruiting job. That is out there. Like very few people actually say
Yes.
that. So that's exciting. And if you want a good laugh, my wife was actually a career counselor for a university down in Florida. So
Oh my
when I
gosh.
met her,
Okay, good to know. Yeah, my
so
inspiration was my career counselor. Her name is Emily at the college I was at, the undergrad. And I was like, I want to do what you do. It sounds so fun. And so I still keep in touch with her to this day.
that's awesome. And you went from a like agency desk recruiter to running the company. Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it was a 13-year process. Very early on, it was a small company. I think we had maybe 13 to 17 employees when I first started. So I was always on the temporary side of the business, which in the beginning was a very small subsection of the business. However, I actually am really thankful I started in a down economy because that's like I learned how hard it was to get a job order and how hard had to work to do that in a down economy. And it was also very sad at the time. I mean, candidates just coming in like crying at your desk. It was like the most sad thing ever. But that was like the hardest I ever had to work. And so then it just got easier, like on the upswing, like 2010, 11, 12, like business was just rolling in. It was like all those seeds we had planted for, doing BD early on were just, coming back to us. It was like this snowball effect. So my division did very, very well. We were a team of two when I first started, grew to a team of, I think, 10 by the time I came off my desk. And so being the most senior person there, was the leader of that division. So I was, player coach throughout probably the second half of that. So became very close with my CEO, gained a lot of her trust. We were joined at the hip, and, started to talk strategy a lot in my one-on-ones with her. So right before I had my first baby, she had a conversation with me about, when you come back from maternity leave, I want you to leave your desk forever and come join us on the other side. And I have to say, I was kicking and screaming. I did not want to leave my desk. I mean, it brought me so much joy. I loved working with clients and candidates, and, really making those matches, and just having that joy of recruiting, the fulfillment it brought to me. However, I saw the greater picture. The company was growing like crazy. It was a wild time, and I knew, in order to continue growing, we needed a better backbone of the company, and that I could help with that. So when I came back from my first maternity leave, went into, that side of the business, and then just continued to grow with the company, and really helped build it out from, it felt like even though it was a 10-year company when I started, 10-year-old company, it started like it felt like a startup, scrappy startup. But by the time I left, it was very well established. We had a policy, procedure, like all the things. So very proud to have been a part of building all of that out.
That's awesome. You probably learned a lot of lessons along the way.
Oh, yes, definitely.
So going into communities, and I know that the Talent Collective is a community that you co-founded, that you're building.
Mm-hmm.
Before we dive into that, how has recruiting communities impacted your own personal career or growth?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll actually, take it back to my days at Premier, which was the agency I was at. I mean, I moved to San Francisco I had one small group of friends, but really dove into my career, and those people became my friends. Being in the thick of it every day, in the office with them, grinding. And then it's like, oh my gosh, we need to go have a drink, or oh my, so all of the trials and tribulations that you go through in agency recruiting, and just being so tight with those people. I think it was twofold. It was really I learned everything I knew from the more senior people, my CEO, my COO. So it was that learning that I got from the community, and that encouragement that okay, you're on the right track, you're doing the right things. Those tips and tricks that you would otherwise not learn on your own, about how to run this business effectively and how to build relationships. But then also that, I think it was that psychological safety, that I built this team where we just knew each other so well, and could all be our complete selves, and just laugh at the end of the day when the shit had hit the fan, and everything went to hell, but we still had a good sense of humor about it at the end of the day. So that community was really my rock, and just gave me such a firm foundation in my career in recruiting.
And it's kind of crazy. It's the people that I've had on the podcast, whether they've realized it or not, they fell into a community that has really helped them grow.
Yes.
And recruiting very much seems like a lone wolf business.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a competitive business where everybody's your competitor. But when it comes down at the end of the day, technically we could be competitors, but we're also growing together. And
Yes.
that's what I've seen in the communities that I've run across.
Yeah.
So
I was
talk about the
really
Talent
thankful.
Collective real quick.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was really thankful the team I was on specifically, we didn't have that competition. And I think one of the reasons is we had a group compensation plan. And so it was if we're all good together, we're all going to grow. And so we really built this cohesion where we didn't have to have that competition with each other. So I'm just so thankful for all of that.
Somebody was smart with that comp plan. Holy crap. So talk about the Talent Collective. What is a Talent Collective?
Yeah, so Talent Collective is a group of women and those who identify as women who come together for a couple of different purposes. One of which being professional development, keeping cutting edge in growth opportunities and what's happening in recruiting in the TA profession, helping elevate each other's careers, but then also the community aspects. So it's a place where women can come together and really build strong relationships and not just network for networking's sake, but really network for the reason of like actually connecting with people and building those deeper relationships. We launched in June in the Bay Area, and we quickly realized that there was a need all over the US and now even globally, women reaching out to us from everywhere saying, we want to be a part of this. So when we first launched, we basically had 3 offerings: one workshop a month, we had peer groups, and we had one in-person happy hour in the Bay Area per month. And very quickly scaled that because we realized we can do so much and we want to do so much for the community. So by now we have probably 4 or 5 times the programming of that. We've scaled to about 225 or so members internationally now at this point. And we're just getting started. So very excited to continue this journey.
I'll ask this question again at the end of the podcast. Like, how can somebody join the Talent Collective?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to our website. So it's www.talentcollective.community. We have our membership structure right there on the platform. We have, once you join, you can get access to our Circle community platform, which also has just a wealth of other information. We have like a toolbox where people put like templates and just all sorts of things you may need in your day-to-day as a recruiter. We have like a partners page where you can get discounts on certain companies that we partner with, service providers to TA. But yeah, you can just go straight to our website. We also have a LinkedIn page, so just search for Talent Collective, and you can find more information that way.
Okay, question.
Yes.
Why is it also only women? Why can't like us guys be there?
Yeah, yes, I know. FOMO, right? We went back and forth quite a bit when we were founding the Talent Collective on whether or not to include men. We love men. We have so many amazing men friends and colleagues in the business. But at the end of the day, and we're actually very happy we made this decision, we decided to just go with women for a few reasons. So first and foremost is, if you look around at the recruiting landscape, a majority of the people in TA are women. However, if you look at the top, there's a lot of men at the top. And if you look around, like even like podcast show hosts, right? Like ton of men podcast show hosts or ton of men speakers out there that are, like kind of at the top of like the leading edge of TA, but there's not as many women. And so we really wanted to advocate for women and help build them up and empower them in their careers. And then secondly, I would say, going back to that safe space, that vulnerability, I think women have a very different experience in the workplace than men do. And even personally, right? Like there's a lot of things personally that women go through that men don't necessarily go through, and vice versa, right? Like I can't say I've been in the shoes of a man or even know what you go through, right? But we wanted to provide, that safe space for women to be able to connect with each other and be vulnerable with each other. And I'll give you the perfect example of why I'm really happy we did so. It actually happened in our launch event back in June. We had a fireside chat. We had 4 or 5 amazing speakers, leaders in the TA community. And, as a Q&A style at the very end, one of the members did a question or asked a question to the panelists. What do you think is like the one thing that you regret in your career, you wish you would have done sooner? And actually, I don't think she said career. She just said in your life. And immediately one of the panelists shot up her hand and she said, I would have gotten my divorce sooner. And it was this moment where it was like she was being so vulnerable and so personal. And like that wasn't what the panel was about, but she was being so real and authentic. And like everyone loved it. Like, it was like, because she was just being so real. And like, I'm sure that created so many connections afterwards. And like, it was one of those things where it's like, if there was a room full of men and women, she wouldn't have felt comfortable saying that. But I think just having just women there, there's a different vibe. And so really that's what we're going for.
That's a great reason to be together. And
Yeah.
like, you're right. I don't think that would have been the same thing if it was like a large group of men and women.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And if you want a good laugh, I think it was like sometime early last year, like my wife was just like popped open Apple Podcasts, hit me up and was just like, "Hey, looking at your last guest, like, why don't you have more women?"
Ooh.
I was like, "Ooh."
Yeah, I like your
I was
wife.
like, "Well, thank you for pointing that out."
Yeah, exactly. Like, I need to be
And
more
like,
intentional about this, right?
and I realized I need to be more intentional reaching out, but it was one of the things that many times as a podcast host, I have a lot of people reaching out to me.
Right.
So like, part of the guest list is just like people just like, "Hey, love to share, love to share." And I started realizing I was just like, wait, there's a lot more men that are jumping up to share
Yes.
than women. So
Yes.
like I on purpose have like because of my wife was just been trying to be a little more intentional of like bringing out like different people
Yes.
all over, not just the people sticking their hands up.
Exactly, right. And like that is such a good point. And I think it goes back to a lot of that like confidence in the workplace and women might not want to be the center of attention or want to reach their hand up and say put me on your podcast, but I think we need to see more of that. So I love your wife and thank her for me.
She's not afraid to tell me how it is.
Yeah, right. Yes. Well, that's a good wife for you.
Now, when it comes to like events, like what kind of events are you guys like building for this community?
Yeah, so we have so many things in play right now. So a big portion of our programming are workshops. So we have 2 to 3. It's usually been about 3 workshops per month, and those will range in topics from like employer branding, AI. There's a lot on AI right now, given what we're going through, DEI, how to influence, how to be a strategic partner. Those are just to name a few. We have knowledge shares every month. So that's where there's not necessarily a speaker who comes in as the expert, but we have a topic and we all come with our mind hive about like, oh, I know this. So for example, we have one coming up that's about like the recruiter's tech stack. So everyone's going to come share like what their favorite tools are and how they use them and what size company they're at, so you kind of know like, oh, I'm going to look into that one, or like this wouldn't work for me because it's for a large company or small company. We have peer groups, so these are 6 to 8 women that meet monthly. We have about 6 of those going right now, and really this is where we see people building those deeper relationships where they can really bring their challenges of their day-to-day forward and talk with the group monthly about those. We are kicking off a mentor program in the new year. We're very, very excited about that. It's going to be awesome. We're in the process of putting all that together. And then in the new year, we're also going to have an executive level membership. So we're putting together programming for that, and a very special membership that is just for executives, and again want to really create that safe space where executives can come and share their challenges and get help from other executives. So yeah, we have a lot going on. We have virtual firesides, we have in-person firesides. We've launched in a couple of different locations. So obviously got started here in the Bay Area, but we've also launched in LA and Seattle. And we're just waiting for more members to raise their hand and say, we want to do this in New York or Chicago. And we know that's going to happen as we continue to get, more people spread out throughout the US and the world. We actually have a couple of members in Australia who are going to start an Australian community down there. So very excited to see people, raising their hands to do that.
Well, that's so exciting. And like once again, for the listeners, if you're not in a community, recruiting community, go find a recruiting community, whether it's Talent Collective, the Elite Recruiter podcast community, some of the other like Facebook communities. Like it's one of the biggest powerful things is one, like you're not alone going through
Yes.
something. you're not alone on a challenge that you've had with a client or a customer or a
Yes.
candidate. Like there are so many times like where like a place like the Talent Collective where you are free to ask the questions and you get great advice. Like you
Yes.
can't do that on Twitter. You can't do that on Reddit. But if you find a curated community, there is so much power and it will help your career tenfold.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add, before starting Talent Collective, I was a member of a couple of leadership communities. Like, this is for like executives, but like it was very like agnostic as far as like what kind of industry. So, there were people in my group that like were in like manufacturing or like advertising or event planning. And I really struggled to connect. Like I learned things from them, but they weren't always super applicable to my business. And so what we're finding more and more is people coming to us saying like, "Oh my gosh, like these are my people. Like they understand exactly what I'm going through and they can actually help me with my challenge," right? And so like I think that's been, one of the hugest blessings of this whole thing is that women can actually get together with other is niche, right? It's other women in TA that know exactly what you're going through. So yeah.
And now, real quick, is this like mostly on the talent acquisition side, or is it a combination of talent acquisition and like the staffing or like and
Both. Yeah,
agency
actually,
side?
we have a pretty
Okay,
diverse membership and we haven't necessarily like it's not that niche where it's like, "Oh, this is only for in-house or this is only for agency." We have people
okay,
in
cool.
like executive search, we have people as like ICs in agencies, we have founders of agencies that are a little bit larger in size. We have in-house all the way through executives to recruiting coordinators and people in recruiting ops, so all of the above, anyone who is in the TA ecosystem, even some people who have that blend of like HR, like the people ops side, and TA. For example, my last role in-house was I was head of people, so I had both under my purview. And we also have some members that have, a blend of that background as well.
Awesome. And before we jump over to fractional recruiting, is there anything else that you'd like to chat about with the Talent Collective?
Let's see. Yeah, I think just to go back to your point about, having that community and how valuable it is in your search, I'll give you a quick example of a recent a situation that happened, and I've heard this is happening a lot more than what I'm knowing about and hear about. So we have a junior member she's been in recruiting for about 2 or 3 years, but she's on the exec search side. And so she's been more of that like sourcer, researcher on the exec search side, and she wants to stay that route, but she got laid off like many other people. So I know somebody who leads executive recruiting at Box. I put the two of them in touch, even though I didn't think Box was hiring for anyone, but I was like, it would be great for you two to know each other, right? So they had a conversation. There are no openings right now at her company, but she put this woman in touch with somebody who leads executive recruiting at Workday. And now that woman is interviewing at Workday. So just a really good example of that network and the connections that can be made, especially right now. I mean, I just think planting those seeds and like being a part of this community is just gonna like be this web that's gonna spread throughout people's lives in so many ways that we don't even know about yet.
I mean, once again, that's like the power of the community, like in the
Yes.
networking community, and that's how jobs get made in
Yes.
place. Yeah, so that's awesome. All right, fractional recruiting.
Yes.
First of all, what the hell is fractional
Yeah.
recruiting? Everybody's talking about it.
Yeah. So I'm going to give my opinion, which, like, the true fractional people might want to slap me because there are people that are, like, have been fractional for a very long time and have a very strong viewpoint about what fractional is. And I think when you're talking about a fractional leader, like a strategic role, it's a little bit different than when you're talking about like a fractional recruiter, more of like the IC working a job, right? So fractional TA, like head of TA, would be different than a consultant, different than a contractor. You're going into a company, you're going to be there long term, and you're really going into a strategic role. Oftentimes it is, maybe 10 to 20 hours a week. So it's part time. You might have 3 or 4 of these clients at any given time. And you're really embedding yourself into the company. So you're a part of the company, you're a part of the strategy, you know all the people, you know all the ins and outs, and you're there for a longer period of time. A traditional consultant is seen more as, somebody who comes in like on a project basis, is not a part of the company, kind of like comes in, comes out, comes in, comes out, right? On the recruiting side, not the strategic function, I think they're one and the same because essentially, last summer I took on a part-time 1099 role that was pretty similar to what I'm doing now. So I work at Talent Refinery, and that is essentially a fractional head of TA firm. And with that, our founder, she gets in a lot of roles that, they're like, well, we need help with recruiting as well. And so I take on those positions. And I think the biggest difference of like consulting versus fractional in this case is our fee structure. So consultants are typically going to be hourly, right? 1099 and hourly. Our fee structure is different. So we do retained, but it's different than like an exec search retain model. It's a monthly retainer. So we say we'll guarantee you up to 10 hours a week on this search. And here's our monthly rate for it, or monthly, one lump fee, and we get paid 100% upfront. So I'm really enjoying it, to be honest with you, because our clients are super, super motivated to fill the role within that month. And I've filled several roles that I think would have taken a lot longer, like a tax accountant role, marketing automation role that was very specific. It had to be like a Pardot automation person. So, I think the benefit of having a model like this is the client's already like super bought in and super like has money on the line, and most of the time doesn't want to go into that second month, which is great for me because then I can take on another project in that next month.
Well, and so I know 2023 has been about a bit of an interesting year, and I think going into 2024 and 2025, I think the way that we recruiters provide services
Hmm.
for our clients is going to definitely shift away from how it's been for the last 30
Yes,
years.
agree.
Uh, I, what are some of the things that somebody like if they're looking at adding a fractional segment of the recruiting business, what are some of the things that they should do, or what's some advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I think it depends on if you want to do fractional. Like right now, I'm working roles as like to make some money while I'm building Talent Collective, right? Like, and I'll probably always work a role or two because I love it and I want to stay in the business. But it's not like I don't see this as my full-time job. I think it's different if you're going to do that versus if you're going to like go all in on fractional. If you're going all in and like you want to have 3 to 4 clients at any given time and like this is your full-time gig, I would set up a business, right? Set up an LLC, set up some other kind of business structure, and really look into that and find whatever's right for you for taxes and all that good stuff. You're going to need to invest in like a sales and marketing funnel, right? Like you need to build an engine that's going to bring you in clients on a regular basis. You're going to need the tools, right? You're going to need like an ATS, a CRM, like all the things to really build an effective pipeline for the roles you're filling. If you're doing fractional kind of like, maybe a role or two, I don't think you need to set up a full business. Like I'm a 10 like on 1099 essentially, and I pay my like I don't have taxes taken out and all that good stuff. But I'm not going to set up a whole business because this is going to be like a portion of, what I make. So I think it's a little different. And like, I don't have an ATS. Like, I'm kind of working out of spreadsheets, and I do have a recruiting tool. Like, I use RecruitBot, which is awesome for sourcing. I have LinkedIn Recruiter Lite. I'm not going all in on the whole LinkedIn Recruiter, like full license. So I really think it depends on your intention. And actually, one of the things that we're going to be doing at Talent Refinery in the new year is we're going to have put on a fractional accelerator course. And so that's going to be in person in the Bay Area. It's going to be, probably like 1 to 2 days, and really teach people how to set up that fractional business model. So if anyone is curious about that, please reach out to me. Would love to share more and get you on the calendar to come to that.
Awesome. And so many times when you're coming in as like a fractional recruiter, you're really just taking over just a few of their hard roles,
Yes.
or are you working with companies that typically don't have recruiting teams or large recruiting teams? Or are you coming in and supporting companies that have large recruiting teams that just don't have the bandwidth?
Both. Both. Yeah. So the clients that I'm working with right now, one does not have a recruiting team, very small company. I think it's about 10 people. The other one right now is, I think they're like closer to like 50. They have a one-person recruiting team, but that person, doesn't have enough bandwidth to fill all the roles. So I'm coming in as like additional help. And then there's also like, I have a good friend. I just went on a walk with her this morning. And so she was telling me all about how like she has a huge recruiting team. Essentially like executives were like, okay, we need to hire 100 people by January. And so she brought in some fractional help for that. So, I think that there's a use case for a lot of different size companies for this.
And if somebody's looking at picking up some like fractional clients, what is the pitch that you would give to a prospective client?
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, great question. So I think it's depending on your price structure, it's going to be much more cost effective than going with, some like an agency, for example, contingent agency. They're going to charge, 20 to 30% on the first year's salary. This is a fraction of that. So I think from that perspective, it's, very flexible, it's very cost efficient. And I think also there is that flexibility where like you can turn it off and on at any given time, right? If you hire someone on a full-time basis, you're locked into that person. You have them on your benefits. Like you don't want to be just like letting people go right and left and then have to rehire, right? So it's more cost effective in that way too, because you're not putting as much into hiring a full-time person, training that person, and then do you have enough work for them long term, right? So it's more flexible and it's more cost efficient, essentially.
That's awesome. And before we move on, is there anything else that you'd love to share with the listeners about fractional recruiting?
I think it's going to be the way of 2024, honestly, and I don't know beyond that what's going to happen, but this is going to be a very telling year for our industry, given that the last 2 years have been such chaos and such crisis for our world. I think if you're struggling to find employment and you can't find a full-time job, this is it. Like, don't just sit around and wait for a full-time job to come. You've got to do something. You've got to take some action. And oftentimes, just even working with one company or two company on a couple of roles, even just like puts that energy out into the universe that like I'm being productive, I'm confident, right? And so like I find like stuff comes to you, right? Like I'm a huge energy person. Like you put good energy out into the world, it's going to come right back to you. So I just encourage people to really not only look into it but take action on it and start working on some roles and start going after, some business.
That's awesome. All right. Well, moving over to the quick fire questions. And this is probably like a good question for you since you're actually talking to a lot of new recruiters too. But what
Mhm.
advice would you give a brand new recruiter getting started in 2024 in our industry on how to become successful?
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about this today. Network, relationships, relationships, relationships. Um, I'll give you another good example. So, over the last couple of years, a lot of recruiters that I know have been let go, laid off. I have people reaching out to me daily, weekly, saying, "Hey, I just got let go. I'm looking. If you know of anything, it's oftentimes on LinkedIn. If you know anything, let me know." People have reached out and said, "Hey, can we hop on a call? I'd love to see how you're doing. I'd love to fill you in on what's going on with me." Like, make the personal connection. That's what's memorable to people. Like, honestly, I think two people have actually like said, "I would love to hop I would love to hop on a call with you." So I think it's and I remember those people and I'm going to think of them, right? So I think it's just all about like making those real connections. Like, we're all people. We're in a human business, right? I think like informational interviews, that's actually how when I was job searching in 2008, like I was randomly reaching out to people on LinkedIn that were in recruiting, like, "Hey, I know you don't have a job posting, but like, can we talk? Can I ask you more about what you do on a day-to-day basis?" Like, and surprisingly, people are open to that, right? It's so people, like, especially senior people, they want to give back. They want to, pour into people who are just starting out their careers and give advice. So, ask for it. Ask for the meeting. Ask for the conversation.
I think I love that you did that because if you want a good laugh, back in 2009, earlier days of LinkedIn, I was trying to move from Orlando to Tampa, and I was working at a large defense contractor, Lockheed Martin, and I just literally friend requested every single DoD recruiter in Tampa, and just, "Hey, I know you don't have anything, but I'd love to chat with
Yes.
you."
That's exactly what I did.
And I
Yeah,
think
and it
that
was
ended
like
up,
not everyone's on LinkedIn at that point, so it was like, kind of slim pickings, but I was just like I was reaching out to people in exec search because I was kind of like, "Oh, that's interesting, but I don't really know a lot about it," right? Or like, so yeah, I think it's just such a good strategy.
and I think for me at that time, it turned into a 42% increase on my salary.
There you go. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Great. Congrats.
So put that extra energy in there. So,
Yes.
but asking the same question, but for experienced recruiters, what advice would you give to them to be successful?
Yeah, so I mean, I think same as above, right? Like it's all about the relationships. It's all about like pouring into people and giving back, and not just take as far as like the relationships that you're building, but also don't get stagnant. Like, looking back, I was at the same company for 13 years and I've heard very similar stories of people that have been with their company for 6 years or longer, or even 4 years. And I think you can get to a place where you're just so like siloed in your own company and what your own company's doing that you're not really looking outside of that. And that's honestly one of the reasons we founded Talent Collective, right? Because there's a lot of information out there that people don't know and aren't hearing. And we want to help, pour that into our recruiting community. So don't get stagnant, don't get complacent, go out and seek out new information, innovation, what's going on in our industry, to try to really stay cutting edge.
Awesome. And has there been a book that has had a huge impact on your own personal career?
Yes. So my favorite book, career-wise, what is The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. Um, there's a mantra that I keep in mind when I'm hiring now, and just about like my team and whoever I want on my team, whoever I want to work with, really. It's hiring people that are hungry, humble, and smart. And I think the blend of those three things, like those qualities in people, trump many, many skills that they, could bring into the job. So I always look for people that are hungry, humble, and smart.
That's awesome. And do you have like a favorite rec tech tool at the moment?
I do. I do. Yeah. So I use Text Expander, and it's not just for recruiting, obviously. You can use it for a lot of different things, but there's so many little like blurbs that I say on a day-to-day basis in my emails and my LinkedIn messages that are like this exact same thing, like looking forward to hearing back, or here's a link to my calendar or whatever. So this essentially, for those of you who don't know what it is, you program in these little snippets and you can just like at like three, clicks of your keyboard, have that sentence, written out. And so it just saves a ton of time. You can also do it if you are actually recruiting and you have like you have to write out these like in-depth like panels and preps and stuff like that. Like you can like pre-program in a lot of those snippets, so you don't have to type things out again and again and again.
Awesome. And like, I want to get your thoughts on like recruiting and AI. Now we've come to, it's been a full year since like Chat GPT has been out.
Hmm.
Everything's like, everybody's always talking about AI, but what's actually happening in recruiting?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of us are still trying to figure that out and kind of like a wait and see a little bit. I've had a lot of fun testing out some AI products, and I feel very fortunate that I am working some roles so that I can be testing some tools. So, I think what's going to happen, I'm kind of like in the middle here. Like, I think AI and new recruiting technology tools are going to help us get better and get more efficient. I do not think they're going to replace our jobs. I think this is just too much of a human business. And more, I'm seeing people seeking out that connection that they don't want to be just talking to a bot, right? Like you can tell when you're talking to a bot. So I think it's going to help us, but not replace all the jobs in our business.
Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah, I know you're in the valley, so you're like in the space where everything's happening. So I had to ask that question. Now, when it comes to your own personal success, what do you think has been a big driver of that?
Hmm. In my younger days, I probably just would have attributed it to just like grit and resilience, right? Like I mentioned earlier in agency, there's just like so much going on every day and so many things that can go wrong. And, you just keep going, keep going, keep going. But I would say to add to that, the humor piece, like trying to keep it light and trying to, like laugh things off at the end of the day, it really helps me to just move forward and, have a sense of humor, not let it affect me, and just, brush things off easily. And then also like having that abundance mentality and like it will come back to you twofold, right? Like I don't have the competitive mindset. Like I'm not out to get someone. I'm just trying to do good and right by myself and like give back to others. I think those are the types of things that have really just helped my mindset and helped me, get through and to do really well and be successful.
That's awesome. And this favorite question, at least for me, that I love asking. If you could take everything that you know now and have a cup of coffee with yourself at the very beginning of your career, what would you tell yourself as a piece of advice?
I would tell myself to travel more, honestly. I think I worked way too much and I wouldn't let other people cover for me because I, was like, oh, these are my clients. I need to like, service them, or I know what's going on. It's going to be too much trouble to like fill someone else in and then like get them, get back caught up when I come back. But I would have let other people cover my desk more and just go travel and see the world and yeah, take more time off, honestly.
Was there something that spurred that?
Um, Well, now I have three young children, so it's a little bit harder to travel. Not that it's impossible, but and I'm also in a very different financial situation than I was. Like when the early days of recruiting were good, they were good. And I think I would have used my money more wisely to create a lot more experiences. But I still have time and I'm still going to do it. It's just I'm gonna get back there.
Well, now you're going to be traveling with the Talent Collective.
I am. Yeah, I already had my Seattle trip, my LA trip, and I'm sure there's many more to come.
That's awesome. Well, before I let you go, is there anything else that you'd love to share with the listeners?
I think my last word of advice is use this time, this downtime in our market or in our industry to learn something new. Don't just sit there and wallow in that I can't find a job, right? It can be easy to be caught up obsessing about your job search every day, especially when you have bills to pay. So I have empathy towards all of that, but take this time to invest in yourself. You may never get some time like this again in your career. So try to do some good with it and see it as a blessing.
That is awesome. Well, definitely excited for everybody to listen to this podcast. And if you are not in a community, first of all, if you know, hit up Krista to check out the Talent Collective. But whatever you can do in 2024, try to find the community that's right for you. Because at least for me, if it wasn't for one of the recruiting communities, and this was a Facebook group, we would have never launched our business and we would have been in a completely
Mhm.
different place. And because of that, like it has had such a huge impact on my family. And just think, a little Facebook group has had that much
Yeah.
impact. So on me. So if you find the right community for you, whether it's Talent Collective or any other community,
Hmm.
it's going to pay dividends in your life if you're involved in the community.
Yeah. Agree.
So
Thank you.
hope you guys crush it in 2024. We are all going to win together, and definitely thank you for listening.
Thanks, Benjamin.